we're on a mission. We invite you to dream, to pray, to discern, to envisage what it is that God is calling you to do and be for His kingdom. What's the vision of our future that beckons or draws us forward? For every single one of us, every day of the week, whatever we find ourselves doing, we are open for business as servants of the Lord.
Oh, hi, and welcome to another episode of Hamilton Central Baptist Church's virtual church. Well, today is Mother's Day, and actually, for all that they do for us, every day ought to be Mother's Day, right? But today, of all days, we take a special moment to thank our mums for all that they mean to us and all that they've done for us. But becoming a parent doesn't come with a how-to manual. Motherhood and fatherhood is not an exact science, and wise mums and dads, they recognize they don't always get things right. But wise children also recognize that without the loving arms of a mother, we simply wouldn't be here today. That there are so many ways that mothers have made life work for us and shaped us into the people that we've become. That there are so many different roles that they play and so often without the recognition and gratitude that they deserve. So here's a tribute to mothers, to which we might want to tag on a hug and a personal thank you today as well. I love the way the psalmist captures the imagery of family in Psalm 127. The Message paraphrase puts it like this: "Don't you see that children are God's best gift, the fruit of the womb, His generous legacy? Like a warrior's fistful of arrows are the children of a vigorous youth. Oh, how blessed are you parents with your quivers full of children. Your enemies don't stand a chance against you. You'll sweep them right off your doorstep." Well, on a day like today, we focus on the blessing and the gift our mothers have been in our lives, giving us birth, nurturing us as infants, comforting our tears, guiding us through to maturity. And it's also a day when mothers especially ponder the gift that their children are to them as they look back over the years. There are lots of passages in the Bible that we could turn to on Mother's Day, but the one that I want to take us to might at first seem a little bit unusual. It's definitely a story about motherhood, but it's not one that we normally read at this time of year. We actually normally read it at Christmas. I invite us to consider the special call to motherhood that God gave to Mary, the mother of Jesus. Motherhood or parenting in general is a high and a holy calling for everyone. But the call to motherhood for Mary, that was incomparably high. She would bear and mother the Savior of the world. Well, you'll recall how the story goes. Mary found out that she was to become a mum. The timing from her point of view actually couldn't have been more awkward. Luke records it this way: In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Well, Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. His kingdom will never end." "Well, how will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I'm a virgin?" Well, the angel answered, "The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who was said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. For no word from God will ever fail." "I am the Lord's servant," Mary answered. "May it be to me according to your word." And then the angel left her. Well, to make the best sense of this passage, there are some historical bits of information that we really need to take into account. Well, we'll start first with the characters in the story. We don't know much about the background of either Joseph or Mary. Joseph's family obviously came originally from the town of Bethlehem, and way back in his lineage was King David. We know that he was a carpenter in the town of Nazareth, and there's a tradition that Joseph was a lot older than Mary, and, well, he may even have actually been a widower, but we can't be certain about that. There's also speculation that Joseph died sometime after Jesus became a teenager. Mary was equally unknown. Scholars speculate that she was in her mid-teens when all of this happened, which would have been a usual time in that culture for young women to marry. Well, one other thing we do know about Mary and Joseph is that they were poor, at least at this stage in their life. They didn't come from old money. And we can work that out from the value of the offering that they gave at the temple after Jesus was born. Well, the text says that at this time, Mary was pledged or betrothed to Joseph. Now, if their engagement was anything typical in the culture of the day, it had all been arranged or negotiated by her parents. And there were 2 distinct stages in the process. The first stage was engagement, which lasted several months, and that was followed by the second stage, which was formal betrothal. And from betrothal onwards, it was difficult for a woman to back out of the marriage without, bringing huge shame on herself and her family. Betrothal was almost equivalent to marriage, but without living together. It was like being husband and wife, only without the intimacy, and to end that relationship required a formal divorce. At the end of the betrothal period was a marriage ceremony or a celebration, and that typically lasted several days. Well, it was during this time that Mary had a divine visitation from an angel or a messenger from God, announcing that God had chosen her to be the mother of Jesus. Now, angels don't feature often in the record of the Bible, apart from on very special occasions when God was announcing something really important. We only have fleeting accounts in the Bible concerning the nature of angels and what they're like. Suffice it to say that they're spiritual beings who operate on a different plane to our rational, materialistic world. Gabriel first appears in the scriptures in the book of Daniel, and then in announcing the birth of John the Baptist, and then, of course, of Jesus. Now, it's easy for us to read this story too quickly and to miss some of the inevitable emotion and trauma that Mary must have gone through. I mean, how do you tell the man that you're about to marry that you're going to become a mother and he is not the father? I don't know, maybe it went something like this.
Sweetie, are you listening?
Mary,
I've said it once, I'll say it again. I can do two things.
Two things at once, yes, I know. But we really need to talk. And Joseph,
Yeah,
I need you to listen.
I am listening so hard right now. You can't even imagine how much I'm concentrating on you and the words.
I'm overwhelmed by your concentration. Can you just stop for a second, please?
Mary, I would love to stop for a second, but I can't.
Why not?
We're gonna be married soon, and I just want everything to be perfect.
Joseph, I love your heart. I really do, but not everything has to be perfect, and that's okay because we don't know what life is gonna throw at us,
Right, but I still want a house worthy of you, and to do that, I've got to work because a man
has got to have a plan.
Have I mentioned that before?
A time or two.
Mary, I have so many plans for us. This table, this is where we're gonna have our meals together, and I've made it big enough for to seat some little ones for down the road, of course.
About that.
Where did I put that chisel?
Joseph, I need to tell you something. Something unbelievable.
Did I put it in that shelf?
I was visited by an angel.
Yeah?
And he told me that I was highly favored.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like a dream until he told me something. And the instant he said it, I knew that it was true.
I just used it. I just had it.
Joseph, are you listening to me?
Yeah, that sounds really great.
Joseph.
Got it.
I'm pregnant.
To be true to church history, we do need to acknowledge that this account of Mary's pregnancy is, well, sometimes the source of controversy. Was the virgin birth a fact of history or simply a fable that covered up the fact that Joseph and Mary had, well, been fooling around before their wedding night? Some say that a virgin birth announced by an angel does violence to sensible thinking. Others, like me, happily accept the biblical narrative as accurate because if you actually believe in the existence of an all-powerful creator God, well, it's not that difficult to accept miraculous or immaculate conception. Well, we can only begin to imagine the anxiety roller coaster that Mary must have traveled after the angel departed, the potential consequences of being an unwed mother in those days were unconscionable. She ran a huge risk of being disowned by her family or even actually put to death. Well, of course, we know the story has a happy ending. Joseph's original plan, once he found out, was to discreetly divorce Mary rather than accuse her of being unfaithful. But then he too had an angelic visitation in the form of a dream, and essentially Joseph received the same message about the child that Mary was carrying. But Joseph's decision to stand by Mary, well, that wouldn't have come without a cost. That they would have both been the butt of rumors and a whole heap of unqualified speculation. Many would have assumed they'd been sleeping together before their wedding. So for Joseph to accept fatherhood of Mary's child meant actually accepting a lot of suspicion and unspoken innuendo. We may not know a whole lot about Joseph, but I actually reckon he was quite a guy. Well, on Mother's Day, what are some lessons that we can learn about motherhood from the life of Mary as she took on this task of being mother to Jesus? If you have a Catholic background, you'll recognize these verses that we read before as foundational in venerating Mary as the mother of God's Son, and an extreme view almost puts Mary on the same level of divinity as the baby Jesus she bore. The typical Protestant view doesn't go quite that far, but it does recognize that God especially chose Mary for a momentous assignment. So, what are some lessons that we can learn from Mary's example? Well, the first one that comes to my mind is this: God chooses ordinary people to do extraordinary things. I mean, one of the things that Mary's story tells me is that there's no predicting whom God might use to do the most amazing things. Mary was an unknown teenager in her nation, and God selected her to carry and mother the Son of God. Have you ever looked at a photo of the people that you went to school with and noted what people in your class have done in life since? Who were the people way back then who were perhaps predicted as most likely to succeed? When I was around 9 years of age, my classroom teacher thought that I had some leadership and communication ability, and she told me, actually in front of the whole class, that one day I was either going to be the Prime Minister of New Zealand or a national news reader. Well, neither of those predictions seems likely to eventuate now, but the fact is we don't know what people will do with their lives. Mary wasn't from a family of note or prominence. She wasn't especially well educated. As far as we know, she wasn't renowned for being a leader or a shaper of people's thinking. She was really a veritable nobody. She was chosen by God from total obscurity for a very special mission. The angel said to her, "Mary, you have found favor with God." I mean, the most obvious implication is that God had been watching Mary. Unbeknown to her, as she went about her routines of life, not assuming much of anything about her future, God was watching her. Well, here's a rather sobering thought. If God was watching Mary, a no one special from an obscure part of our planet, maybe God is watching us too. Or to put that another way, if we were to employ the imagery of a talent scout, God's attention is not only caught or held by those with a high profile, those who are predicted most likely to succeed. No, God watches the quiet ones too, who work behind the scenes, who don't perform for recognition. I love the story of a group of tourists that were traveling through a European village, and one of them walked up to an old man sitting by the side of the road who obviously was a native of that little area, and asked him in a patronizing tone, "Was anybody famous born in this village?" To which the old man replied, "Nope, only babies." Now, great achievers or famous people or leaders of revolutions or world-renowned inventors or brilliant artists, they're not born great. You cannot organize the gene pool for greatness or significance. In fact, usually it's the complete opposite. The people who do the most amazing things, they so often come from the most unlikely of situations. I mean, Mary isn't the only character in the Bible to be sovereignly chosen by God out of obscurity for special responsibility. The Bible is actually full of stories of God using the most unlikely of people to do the most amazing things. I mean, Moses, for instance, was a runaway murderer with a speech impediment. Joseph was he was a long-term prison inmate. Ruth was a foreigner. Esther was a slave. Rahab was a prostitute. David was the forgotten youngest son in a large family. Jeremiah was a philosopher with serious mental health issues, certainly in the area of depression. And Peter, well, he was a bombastic fisherman and possibly a coward. Matthew was a dishonest inland revenue officer, and Paul the apostle was a hater and a persecutor of Christians. Now, I reckon there's a principle here that's worth grasping. God doesn't select great people to do ordinary things. He selects ordinary people to do great things in the power of His Spirit. And I guess that means that every single one of us is useful in God's big cause. No exceptions. The Apostle Paul would later write these words describing how every single one of us is useful in God's mission. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7. Now to each one the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. God chooses to show His glory through all of us, on both men and women, young and old, educated and uneducated, white-collar, blue-collar workers, irrespective of race and life experience. The Spirit of God manifests Himself. Ordinary, obscure, least likely to succeed people, just like you and me, receive an empowering anointing from God to serve in His cause. Well, maybe a second lesson we could learn is that God's assignments, they're not necessarily the path of least resistance. Being favored by God and given a special assignment does not necessarily mean it will be easy. When we look back on the life of Mary with 2,000 years of history, it's tempting to romanticize her life. We paint her picture in our minds with a kind of surreal halo around her head, but that's actually not true to the text. The call of God to motherhood actually led Mary into serious conflict and heartache. I mean, if the rumors were true and she had been sexually promiscuous, according to the law, she could have been stoned to death or publicly humiliated. And if Joseph had divorced her, it would have meant huge ignominy, let alone the difficulty of trying to bring up a child on her own in that culture. Now, having gotten over the shock of the angelic visitation, my hunch is Mary probably didn't run around perpetually jumping for joy at what God was asking of her. Some of our quaint romanticism about Mary, I think, needs to be tempered. We sometimes let it get in the way of the actual story. That this was a tough assignment. The task of motherhood that God was asking of her was, well, not only that she live with ambiguity and innuendo and suspicion, she would later watch her son rejected and reviled and ultimately nailed to a cross. There's a school of thought that suggests that when you are in the center of God's will, everything goes well for you. You know, to be obedient and righteous, to be called, means that God is with you and fights all your battles. On the other side of that coin, if you encounter difficulty or opposition or persecution, well, that must mean something has gone wrong. Calamity or hardship or stress must be caused by sin, either yours or someone else's, and it's a sign that you're out of the will of God. Well, that's a view of life that's actually not true to either the Bible or reality. I mean, we do our best to do good and to be righteous, but we must not assume that being true to God's call is the path of least resistance. Sometimes doing what God asks of us brings us into more conflict and hardship, not less. Followers of Jesus throughout the centuries have often been thoroughly misunderstood for what they stand for and sometimes mercilessly persecuted. Sometimes doing what God asks of us is darn hard work. But being a mother, and especially a mother to Jesus, was not always a euphoric blessing. That there were times when, well, she wondered if her son had lost his mind. She probably wished that he'd keep his mouth shut a bit more often. She watched him rile the religious leaders and challenge their hypocrisy. And As I say, then she watched her firstborn son suffer the most horrendous abuse and cruel death. Now, we can sometimes resent the assignment that God gives us. We don't need the pressure or the stress. Well, sometimes actually the best results do require endurance of a little stress and discomfort and tiredness, rather than selfishly opting to only walk down easy street. Diamonds, they're fashioned in between a rock and a hard place. Pearls are formed by the rasping grit of sand in the shell. And it was Jesus who said that to be one of his followers means living a counterculture lifestyle. We march to the beat of a different drum than the culture that we live amongst. Jesus predicted it would happen, and he even suggested that we should rejoice in the face of it. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of God, Jesus said. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. There may be a third lesson, is that Mary modeled the right response to God. Now, I don't know how you respond to an angelic visitation. I think it might actually freak me out. I mean, verse 20 says, Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. Well, this description of Mary's initial response to the angel, I think, is possibly one of the greatest literary understatements of all time. She was probably paralyzed with fear. But she listened to what the angel Gabriel had to say. And there was a sense that God was speaking to her, that there were obviously questions that came to mind in terms of biological logistics. How will this be, Mary asked the angel, since I'm a virgin? Well, when the angel explained what would happen, in the end, there was Mary's response. Verse 38, I am the Lord's servant, Mary answered. May it be to me according to your word. You see, when God asks something of us, how do we respond? Do we say yes? Or do we hesitate? Perhaps equivocate? I mean, serving God is not normally a matter of negotiation. We don't negotiate the terms of the contract. While we sometimes refer to Christian faith as having a friendship relationship with God, that doesn't imply an equality of standing. At best, it's actually like the relationship between a benevolent master and a servant. In fact, the Apostle Paul often referred to himself as a willing slave of Christ. Well, slaves don't have negotiated rights. It's been suggested that the most common prayer in the world is, Thy will be changed. In other words, God, do you really know what you're doing? Well, maybe I could modify what you're asking. By contrast, it's been suggested the world's greatest prayer is, Thy will be done. I mean, that's how Jesus prayed, right? In the Garden of Gethsemane, when he emotionally pondered the cost of the cross. And in the end, he submitted to the will of his Father, even at the cost of immense suffering and anguish. And most probably when Mary said these words of faith and response, she didn't fully understand all that it would entail. And, well, that's true for us as well. We say yes to God for what we see, but we don't know all that our yes might actually lead us into. Mary could see a little bit into the future, but not all the way, and yet her response, I think, is a model to us of surrender to God's lordship. We surrender control and we let God take over the management of our lives. That's what it means to be a follower of Jesus. We swap from the driving seat to the passenger seat. We relinquish control. We stop plotting our own course in favor of letting God map out our future. When we come to crossroads or choices in life, we don't just make our own decisions on our own. We pray, we listen for God's advice, and we read the record of his dealings with people like us that we find in the Bible. And then we choose to obey his direction, even if at the time we can't fully understand it. So in closing, I wonder what it might be that God is asking of you and me at the moment. Maybe as we look ahead to beyond these unusual days of a world pandemic. Today being Mother's Day, can I hold up to us the example of an unknown, innocent teenage girl who lived in an insignificant part of our world, who was asked by God to be the mother of the Son of God, an assignment that carried a huge price and would lead her through the deepest seasons of anguish and grief, an assignment she probably didn't fully understand at the time, but her response was unequivocal. "May it be to me as you say," she said to the Lord.
I'm thankful for my mum because she always helps me.
I'm thankful for my mum because she always listens to me whenever I have a problem or if I just want to talk, and she's always there for me.
I'm thankful for my mum baking. I'm thankful for my mum doing things like cooking dinner. She mainly does cooking. I'm thankful for my mum that she gives me hugs and kisses.
I'm thankful for my mum because she's very helpful and generous and always there when I need her.
She makes really good brownies. I'm thankful for mum being able to get all the schoolwork ready.
And I'm thankful for my mum because she makes dinner and feeds the cat.
I'm thankful for my mum because she provides for us. And I'm thankful that Mummy can read books for me.
I'm thankful for my mum when she does the cooking and washing because that's really helpful.
And she's really funny.
I'm thankful for my mother because she takes care of me. I'm thankful for my mother because she is kind to me and helps me learn.
Thank you, Lord, that we have mums. Thank you for our mums to be so helpful. I'm glad that you can help Mum for her to be making us believe in Jesus and helping us to trust Him. Amen.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me.
Well, today being Mother's Day, we thought it might be quite nice to check in with a live one, talk to a mum. So we're having a chat with Sue Abernathy. So Sue, you've got more experience than most when it comes to motherhood. You've been a mum to 8 kids. Well, what are their ages and stages?
Well, you say more experience, but I also have had the opportunity probably to make more mistakes. But anyway, moving on. I have 6 daughters and 2 sons, and the oldest daughter is 29, and after her is a soon to be 27-year-old daughter. And then the first son is, he's 25 at the moment, well, 24, soon to be 25. And then another daughter, and she's 22. And a daughter who's 20, who got married the day before lockdown. So that was pretty exciting. And then there's an 18-year-old daughter, a 16-year-old daughter, and a 13-year-old son. So
Fantastic.
that's all.
Well, I've got 8 grandchildren. I can barely remember their names, let alone, no, I can remember their names. I can't remember their birthdays, but none I can remember their birthdays. But so, as a follower of Jesus, Sue, how has your faith shaped your approach to being a mum?
Being a follower of Jesus has really affected every aspect of my life, probably based on this one idea. And this one idea is I want my Heavenly Father to look at my life and be pleased with what he sees, out of a sense of my own gratitude for my salvation. So I'm motivated by gratitude for what he did for me at Calvary. I want to live my life in such a way so that Christianity at least looks somewhat attractive to my children. The other aspect of mothering from a Christian perspective is that I have this unending additional resource to enable me day by day to be at least a half decent mother. I know all the research shows that just to be good enough is what's good. And so that I'm just trying to be a good enough mother who loves in a Christ-like way. That obviously is quite challenging because loving in a Christ-like way is a challenge for anybody, I suppose.
Absolutely.
But I think mothering has changed me more than my children. It's more of a journey. A quote I love that somebody said was, motherhood is my journey out of self-centeredness. And I've definitely found that to be true.
Wow.
Motherhood has also required me to dig deep and find out how to love.
Yeah. Being a Christian, of course, doesn't make us perfect. So what's been the biggest struggle for you being a mother? I
guess I now have 29 years to look back over, and this answer might change. But at the moment, it's probably been fear. Fear of not getting it right, fear of my children not landing up choosing to follow Jesus. One of the opposites of fear could be trust. And so quite early on, I realized, oh man, I cannot handle the worry of one child, let alone 8. I'm going to have to learn to trust God, trust that he loves them much more than I do, and much more faithfully and much more perfectly than I do. So I'm going to have to trust his work in their lives. And in some way, it may be through me that he draws them to himself.
Let's flip that coin over. What about your greatest joy?
Realizing that, people might think, gosh, why would you have 8 children? Well, I didn't actually set out when I got married thinking I'm going to have 8 children. I actually thought I would have 2, and that would be great. As time went on, we just kept adding to this family, partly because we just loved each one of them so much and thought another one, we couldn't do wrong by having another child. Looking back now, I realize what a blessing it has been to me to have these 8 people in my life, and it's like this reciprocal process of God using them to mold me and God using me to mold them. And I consider it a huge blessing, actually. Sometimes blessings come our way that don't look that way necessarily. And then afterwards we realize, man, I'm a blessed woman. I consider myself rich in the most important commodity, which is people.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I've met all of your kids, but I've met quite a few of them, and they are fantastic. So I reckon you've got a lot to be joyful about. You've done a great job. So over the past few years, there's more to you than just being a mum, of course. You've been studying to become a counsellor, and you've recently graduated, so congratulations to you on that.
Yay!
Long journey. But is this an idea that you've had for a while?
It might have been an idea that I had for a while, but in my years of raising children, I was homeschooling as well, and I didn't ever think it was a possibility, but I thought it would be something I might like to do. My life circumstances led me to need to choose a career at the ripe old age of probably 48. So I wanted a career that could give back out of my life experience. So counseling seemed like a good choice. So 4 years ago, I started my journey at BTI, Bethlehem Tertiary Institute. That has been a blessing. Studying counseling is one of those courses that you study that you will not easily get through it without undergoing enormous metamorphosis yourself.
Yes.
So,
it's a bit like studying in a mirror, isn't it? You actually end up having a good look at yourself. Yeah. Is there a particular area of specialism that you're hoping to work in as a counsellor?
I guess at the moment I'm just taking whatever work comes my way. I have enjoyed working with people who struggle with depression, anxiety, and anger. I guess in my heart, my own life experience has been around marriages that are labeled as Christian, but one person in the marriage is behaving in a way that's very destructive. That's caused me to do quite a lot of research into what is a biblical answer in that situation. People find it quite easy to recommend separation or divorce when there's physical violence, but we're beginning to learn that verbal and psychological and even spiritual abuse is as destructive, if not more. God's way smarter than we are. He knew that marriage is the right idea. It's the best way to raise children who will hopefully seek God. But while the institution of marriage is critical for that, God also put in place measures to protect people who may, under the institution of marriage, come in harm's way. So his intention wasn't for marriage to be a place where harm happened. It was a place where blessing should happen. And so right back in Leviticus, he put in place some laws that would protect women in particular. And those were the divorce laws. So I've done quite a lot of reading up on that area, but also it would be a great pleasure to coach women who find themselves, or men, in destructive relationships that aren't a good reflection of what God intended marriage to be. So that was a long-winded answer. So
no, it was a very good answer to a serious question. And look, Sue, you're a treasure, and we just love having you and the kids that live with you, part of our church family, and may the Lord open new doors of opportunity for you to use the gifts and the training that you've been given for His glory. Thanks for letting us catch up with you today. Blessings on you.
Oh, I can't wait to see the rest of my extended family soon at church.
Let me bring in Daniel Milburn, one of our young adults at Hamilton Central Baptist Church, who has been doing some amazing work with the Salvation Army Food Bank during this lockdown period. So, Daniel, tell us what you've been doing.
Over the past few weeks, I've been helping out at the Salvation Army, sorting food parcels which get delivered, and we also get a whole bunch of food, and we've got to rebox it, send it across the road, and pack pallets to send off to other centres around the country.
How many weeks have you been doing this now?
Since level 4 started.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And I guess the food all comes in large quantity and has to be broken down.
Some of it does, but other things you do get, which is already broken down into manageable parts.
You're no stranger to working with food. You're actually partway through your course training to be a chef. How has the COVID-19 lockdown affected your work and your studies?
Well, my studies have been affected a lot because it was something like 18 hours practical to 6 hours theory. But now we don't have that practical component, so we're doing a lot more theoretical learning via Zoom lectures and also doing video tutorials of what we need to know for our assessments.
What particular field within the broad gamut of being a chef do you hope to work in?
I hope to continue working in a cafe at the moment. That's what I want to do. But then I also want to move on to working with young people, especially young troubled youth, and use my skills with food to teach them new things. So that's the main goal.
Yeah, you have a real passion in that area, which I just think is massively commendable. I really do. Hey, I saw a great photo of you the other day. I gather the Salvation Army received a large shipment of flour, and there's a photo of you transferring this white powder into smaller bags on a scale. It did look like it might have been something else there, Daniel. And it wasn't just flour, was it?
Yeah, it was 100% flour.
Very good. So what are you looking forward to when we get out of lockdown? What are you looking forward to the most?
Getting back to work, getting back into my course, and just being able to cook again, because not a lot of opportunity to do a lot of the cooking which we need to do at course at home, because a lot of it is quite expensive.
Well, really appreciate you, and just want to commend you again for what you've been doing down at the Salvation Army. As I say, I know they have been hugely, hugely appreciative of what you've done for these last 5 or 6 weeks. So well done, mate, and we look forward to seeing you in the flesh when we all get back together again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, finally today, let me bring in Nancy Cager, who's one of our elders at Hamilton Central Baptist Church. you're in a bubble of one, Nancy. How's it?
Yes,
What's it been like for you these weeks of lockdown?
I'm used to my own company, Brian. I've lived on my own since 1996, so being in a bubble of one is not a real problem. I guess what I miss most is the ability to meet with people, even though I'm comfortable with my own company. And, I've been socializing through Zoom. It's just not the same. It's the coffee chats on Sunday with, and then meeting friends, having dinner, going for a show. That's what I really miss most, yeah.
Yeah, I bet. So do we all, yeah. So you're involved in a number of business and cultural ventures in Hamilton City, and we really appreciate all that you do in that regard. But what are your thoughts about the long-term impact of the coronavirus on New Zealand culture and the economy? Give us a philosophical view.
Wow, how much time do I have? Arts and culture, we're trying very hard to keep it going, but my concern is the disposable dollar, because people are hurting financially. In the aftermath of this health crisis, we will have an economic crisis. That is, that's a certainty. So there'll be less disposable dollar to spend, and I think that could have an impact on the cultural things that's going on. Theatres will have to sort of fight for whatever little is left, and I know they will all resume, and I know they will all want to bring things for us, and I think that for our mental health being and so on, the arts part is really important. I know that I'm involved with Boon Street Art. We're already planning ahead for next year's Street Art Festival. So a lot of things are still happening in the background to try to make things happen as soon as we are in that position to do so. So I think long term, the arts will survive. There will be people whose livelihood will be greatly affected. Arts it's never been the best payer from a livelihood point of view, and it will be even more difficult because a lot of arts organization depends on the philanthropic dollar, and that will be affected as well. Investment incomes go down, so the amount of money that's available to be distributed will also go down. So that's sort of like, I think there will be some impact. Hopefully we can all rally together and help them to get back onto their feet as soon as possible.
So, yeah, right. I mean, you might have touched on this before in the first question, but what are you looking forward to the most when we do find we can get back together again?
Oh, getting together with friends and having lots of hugs again, because, the lack of human contact, I think that's what you see people. And I have a girlfriend who's been, who's done my grocery shopping for me, and she leaves it by my doorstep, and we have a conversation 2-3 meters away from each other, and it's just not the same,
Yeah.
Reach out to somebody. That's what I miss most, really.
That human touch factor is really important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, Nancy, in years past, you have challenged people in our church to think wisely and strategically with what they do with their tax rebates, especially from charitable donations.
Yeah.
So we're anticipating we're probably going to take a bit of a hit this year. But what any advice that you have for us for 2020?
I think that, we've reached the end of the tax year. The tax certificates have all been distributed. So all of us would be putting in our returns to the IRD, and I'll hopefully get the tax returns very soon. So what I would say is that if your family unit have not been affected financially, and some people have been fortunate that they still have kept their jobs and still receiving the full 100% of pay, I think if you are in that privileged position, I would ask you to consider gifting all of your tax refund from your last year's donation to the church back to the church, because we will see a decline in our giving, because some of our congregation will be affected. They will be, seeing that their income have gone down maybe only to the wage subsidy, maybe only to 80% of what they're earning. So their giving will decline, and they might need the refund for themselves to tide over this time. So on that basis, those of us who are in a position to do so, I certainly would ask you to prayerfully consider to put all of it towards the church to help us balance the shortfall that we anticipate will come and find us.
Right. Well, Nancy, I love working with you on the eldership, and we just love having you part of our church family. You've been, how many years have you been part of Hamilton Central Baptist?
Oh, my word, since 1993.
Okay, yeah. So you almost know your way there off by heart now. That was great.
Yeah, I'm part of the furniture.
Well, you're a wonderful part of the furniture, and stay well, stay safe.
I will.
We'll look forward to seeing you when we all get back together again.
Definitely.
Well, here we are, still in our COVID-19 world. If you're like me, you're looking ahead to level 2 and the little bit more freedoms that we might have. But as we as a church have thought about where we're heading, it's pretty clear that we won't be operating as a large group, well, not for a little while yet. So as we look ahead to the next little while, we'll continue with HCBC Virtual. It's interesting, I've been enjoying the programs, and I hope you have been too. It's interesting to think about that word virtual. It means almost as normal, but not quite. I was looking through the book of Luke, and what I find in there is these wonderful expressions of the church actually operating out of homes, and pretty much that's where we're at the moment. So maybe as we reflect upon that virtual and normal issue, maybe there is some normality of the church meeting at homes. As we head over the next few weeks, here's a challenge. What we've been doing as a family is meeting together virtually on a Sunday morning. We've been spread over 4 different sites over most of the lockdown, and so the folks here in Hamilton East, we've met together in this lounge. We have, by using some of the digital tools that we've got, like Zoom, which you might have heard of, or WebEx, there's a number of them, we've been able to bring in virtually Campbell, who is out at WEC, Letty at East West next door, and Chris and Shuri across the other side of the river. So we've set up a Zoom meeting on a Sunday morning, had all of those people present virtually in the digital world. We've shared the screen and watched the program together and listened together. At the end of that, we have a time of prayer together as a family, and then after that, have some time of catching up. I've heard of life groups doing exactly the same, where using one of those digital tools, they actually get together and meet virtually and discuss the program, discuss the message that came out on Sunday, and at the end of that time, have a time of prayer together and just share life together. So here's a good challenge as we look forward to the next few weeks, the next stage of our COVID-19 journey. Here's a challenge. Have a think about coming together in a virtual way on a Sunday morning using one of these digital tools. If you've got the digital know-how to do that, I encourage you simply to step out and do it. It bases around inviting people through email into a meeting that you put together. If you just search on Zoom or WebEx on the net, you'll find all the instructions to do that. If you are not quite so confident and you'd like help with that, I just encourage you to either contact me, or you can contact the church through reception at HCBC and simply ask to have some help to set that up. If you think about a group that you might want to work with, it could be geographical in your suburb of the city, or it could be based around your friend circle, your oikos group, or it could be simply people that you have something in common with. And it's a way to get together on a Sunday morning, share that worship time together, pray together, and then that will take us through the next series of our time in terms of in the COVID-19 world. Here's a cool thing. As we were thinking about this, I thought about that little meme that Brian put up the other day, and it was Satan saying, I've shut down all the churches, and God simply looking back and saying, on the contrary, I've opened a church on every street in the city. So here's an opportunity for us to take that seriously and see if we can create lots of life groups around the city, meeting together on a Sunday morning doing that. Here's a fun activity to do if you want to. I challenge you to get your camera out or your phone and go out and take a photo of your letterbox and then a second photo of your street name and send those in to reception@hcbc.nz. And what we want to do is put together a montage of all of these pictures of where physically the church is throughout, our churches throughout Hamilton at the moment. I think it'll make an interesting picture. So a picture of your letterbox number and a picture of your street name will put it all together and actually create a celebration of the church dispersed through the city. Have a good week, everyone. Bless you.
Thanks for joining with us again today. As the Christian church has done for thousands of years, we invite people to honour God through their giving. And if you'd like to give to the Lord's work through the life of our church, here's our bank account number. Simply go to our church's website and click on the red button and follow the links. In closing, one more tribute to mothers. The poet Dakota Gray in 2014 published these wonderful words. Mum, you're the centerpiece of my life, the light in my sun. I can't thank you enough for all you've done. You make me smile when I'm sad. You're the best mother a child could ever have. You console me deeply when something's wrong. You know when something's happened or something's going on. I appreciate the love you bring in. You cheer me up when I lose. You make me laugh when I win. You turn my moon into a sun. You've done too much, though my life has just begun. You give me a shelter and food to eat. You're the soles in my shoes, the bones in my feet. You support me and hold me tall. You help me stand high and don't let me fall. You make my life easier in every way, and that's why I want to say Happy Mother's Day.